Tom, what's
Mr. Patrick.
happening? How are you, my friend? How are you guys?
Doing well.
Good deal. Where you at, Florida?
I'm in Florida. Weather's beautiful and I'm in here instead of out playing golf.
Oh, hell, I hear you. Hell, sometimes, it's a little chilly here. Where's everyone else at? Mike, where you at?
I'm here in Kansas City.
Yeah,
Just got back.
I hear you.
Kind of had to run my dad around a little bit today. He's 92 years old and had a little procedure done. So just kind of ran in the house here and got on board here with you guys.
Heck yeah, I appreciate it.
Cool.
Sounds awesome.
Did we ever get a hold of anyone at CGB, Todd, or no?
Yeah, but didn't Greg get back with you and say that gentleman was coming? I saw an email between you and him, and I just thought it was all set up.
All right. I don't think
Let me go back and look.
they never followed up with me then. So,
Okay.
and then
Nate should be on.
then Nate, yeah.
Yeah, is he getting on? He had that article from yesterday. It's pretty interesting that he sent over, but yeah, crazy times in transportation world for sure. I would say definitely one for the book. So what are we thinking? What are you guys seeing? Tom, you want to go ahead and maybe introduce yourself, and Mike, you jump in, and okay, we'll go from there.
Well,
Yeah, go
oddly
ahead,
enough, we're seeing the railroads perform fairly well. This precision schedule railroading thing that they started implementing about 4 years ago is working, particularly once cars get into one terminal. And between the first terminal and last terminal, trains are moving pretty good. Their service to pick up from an industry and get it to that first terminal and from the last terminal to the customer really sucks. I mean, it's worse than you could imagine. But at least once we get it on a train, it moves. We kind of have a schedule of when product's going to arrive, unless it's just trains. And the trains, grain trains, seem to be moving okay. Volumes are not huge. Yeah, intermodal's got an issue here, but every commodity's up from last year on the rails. But hell, last year was a weak year, so that really is not telling us much. If you look at the record year for the railroads was 2015. If you go back and look at 2015, we're still down about 10%, pretty much across the board on all commodities, and we're way down on some commodities like coal. So, in general, this year has not been a lot worse than we've seen in other years.
I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I am. Hey, Mike, what's happening on the trucking and side of things? What are you guys seeing the big hiccup?
The big hiccup is the same it's been for the last several years, is just the driver shortage. Our guys can't find drivers. Everybody's got trucks sitting on the fence. I don't think it's easing or anything else. I think it's probably getting worse. I think a lot of that's the number one complaint, Kevin, in our industry, that they just can't get qualified drivers. And freight rates are up, so that's probably because of the driver shortage. There's a capacity issue from having drivers to getting new equipment replaced, to with the chip shortage and everything else like that, parts and everything along those lines. So freight rates are up, and freight's good, a lot of freight, as Thomas said, and but it's just the same thing. It's just that driver shortage, driver retention. And I think too, there a lot of guys are nervous about the mandate coming at I think it's the end of this month, for over 100. A lot of the drivers will just check it in. I think that's part of the problem right now. A lot of the drivers giving up on it. And, it's kind of an older demographics of drivers anyway, probably 50s, probably an average age of most drivers. And a lot of them just said, you know, we're not going to do this anymore. So they walk away from it. So I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I don't see any resolution in the foreseeable future. So.
Yeah, one
Mike,
question I had on the demographics is how many younger guys are coming on board? I mean, to be honest, I couldn't tell you. I don't know one person under 35 driving a truck.
You know, Jordan, you know, that's the problem. And, you know, the pay is, you know, has come up. I think every one of our truck lines have taken increases over the last 2 years. Some of them as many as 2 increases in a year to attract drivers. And it's still not just happening. I think there's some joint ventures with the ATA and other organizations to try and see if there's somehow, some way we can relax some of the guidelines. Right now, you got to be basically for a CDL, for an over-the-road driver, you've got to be a minimum of 21 years old. You know, a lot of them they don't want to hire anybody unless they're 25 with 3 years experience. So, you know, you got to get that experience somehow. And so I think they're going to have to drop down into the high school or to the VOTEC area and attract people there, but they're going to have to reduce some of the federal guidelines that are prohibiting those drivers from driving. Right now, you can't be an interstate driver if you're 18. So, you know, they're going to have to work to that end. But at the same point, you know, how comfortable are you putting an 18-year-old in 80,000 pound vehicle? It goes 70 miles an hour, you know.
yeah.
So
And that's what Mike, that's what I was told, Mike. A bunch of my buddies, well, a bunch, but some of them that own some trucking companies and other guys that were driving, they said that once COVID hit, it kind of exasperated, just kind of added fuel to the fire on some of the older teams and, you know, husband, wife teams and the older folks that just kind of bowed out and just said, hell with it. They weren't going to jack with driving into California or driving into New York and battle all the craziness that was going on at the time. And hell, they just kind of checked it in, and we haven't been able to replace a lot of those drivers, I guess. So that's
you're exactly right, Kevin. We had a problem before COVID, and now it's just kind of escalated. And with the mandate coming, I think that's me. I just think it's going to get worse. I think there's right now, last I saw that Bob Costello with ATA said there's 80,000, you know, that 80,000 jobs. That's the driver shortage, 80,000 right now. So that's hard to build on, you know.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of them aren't super fans of the vaccine and things. So, like you say, they may not.
Exactly.
A few more out of
from my experience and having driven a truck all the way through high school and college, I drove over the road for years and worked for truck lines. My brothers, 2 of my brothers were presidents, or one of them was president, one of them was general manager of a major truck line. They were van haulers,
right?
Union. But, you know, a lot of these guys are really independent. And when California passed this gig law, you know, the law that said that the Uber drivers and the Lyft drivers had to be employees and couldn't be contractors, my understanding was there was tens of thousands of contractors in California that owned their own tractor. They didn't own a trailer, but they just hauled freight for somebody else. So whether it was a Snyder or Hunt or whoever it was could contract with them, or Walmart, they were just independent drivers. And when they passed that gig law that said that you had to be an employee, a lot of those guys didn't want to be an employee. They wanted the flexibility of having their own tractor, driving where they wanted to go, when they wanted to go, accepting loads. And there were a lot of new apps that came out that allowed those guys to be really flexible about which loads they took and where they hauled them and what freight they hauled and when they got back home, and, you know, husband and wife teams and that sort of thing. When that law passed, we lost a lot of drivers.
You know, and it was interesting. We had, you know, just from a company standpoint, we don't write that much out on the West Coast, but there was a strong surge into like Idaho, Texas, all the other states where these guys were making new authorities, establishing residency in other states to go haul there.
Yeah,
and so,
get out of California.
But, even then, from an insurance perspective, a new authority, guys coming out, wanting to start their own truck line, you're looking at liability insurance anywhere from $15,000 up to $20,000 plus to provide liability insurance for one truck.
Yep.
For a new authority. And, anybody, if they're going to go get hired on somewhere else, they got to have basically 2 years experience before anybody will take them. So.
Well, the pay is getting pretty good out there, though. Some of these
It
guys are
is.
beginning to pay them. And I thought if my wife wanted to see the country, I've still got a CDL, so I could get right back in it.
The road. Well, if you're interested, Thomas, I could hook you up with some good people.
Oh, I think I'll stay and fight the railroads.
Good move.
Guys, is the congested warehouses, they're full. You can't get to a loading door. You sit and wait for unloading. You just drop the hook, there's no room. Intermodal terminals or port terminals, it's a quagmire. These guys, they may go from getting 3 loads a day to 1 doing short drays in LA. How can you expect them to stay in that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Nate, where are you at now?
Fort Worth,
Where are you at? You're getting an echo on that thing. Where are you at?
in Fort Worth, Texas.
Oh, you are? Okay. Perfect. Who you with right now?
I started my own consulting company with a real good friend of mine, Andrew Johnson, who used to be head of government affairs for BNSF. He and I were partners in getting a bunch of rail projects done, big choke points, Power 55, Colton Crossing, upgrading the BNSF line across Iowa and so forth. And after I ran FEC, talked to Andrew and said, the Class 1 railways, as you all know, have made massive reductions in staffing. Average is 25% cut in employment. And guys that can do projects, work with engineering firms, and get communities to back putting a project together, like we built the logistics park, Kansas City and Gardner, just west of Kansas City. There's not those people in the railroads anymore. So we're doing it as independent, free-thinking, wild guys, and doing pretty good at it, Kevin. It's a lot of fun.
Perfect. What, Mike, you seeing anything on the autonomous side? Any autonomous trucking, self-driving taking place out west, or you guys messing with that much? Or?
Not too much. I think, there are those carriers around that are doing kind of the railroad type logic, where the trucks drive in tandem, and, they're looking at that. It's floating around out there. We haven't seen that yet. I mean, I know the technology is probably there, but, from a standpoint of, from an insurance perspective, where we're going in, it's all about the driver right now. We haven't explored that much at this point, Kevin.
Yeah. Huh. Jordan, Todd, you guys got some things people have written in?
Yeah, even on like the warehouses and the logistics of some pieces. I know some guys are saying, like on the fertilizer side of things, or chemical side of things, I guess, is they have the chemicals, but they don't have the lids, or the warehouses don't have the people filling orders. How much is that backing up or messing with the transportation itself? Is it messing with it at all, or?
Well, let me speak just a little bit to that. We are currently looking for distribution centers for some of our clients, large distribution centers, with several rail doors and, a dozen or more truck doors. And there's just nothing out there in the areas we're looking. I don't want to say nationwide, but, we're encompassing some pretty good sized geographic areas. And we're not finding any current warehouse space available. Everything that we are quoting, including Southern California, is build to suit. We have one guy in Southern California that has a limited space, about 90,000 square feet of warehouse space. He's the only one that's quoted us in the whole LA market. When you get down into the Southeast, we have about 4 guys that are all quoting greenfield warehouse space. There's nothing else available. I mean, we put out, you know, to all of the major real estate companies, Jones Lang LaSalle, and all of those guys looking for warehouse space. And they came back and said, no current warehouse space available. So I think because of the logistical log jams that we've had, a lot of companies have just gone out and taken whatever warehouse space was available. And there's just very, very limited space. In fact, I sent Kevin an article a couple of days ago that said that the warehouse space nationwide available right now is about 2%. It's normally above 12%. And currently it's only 2% of available space. So it's tight and not going to get better.
So much of our business, you know, for our truckers is, you know, just in time delivery. And, you know, and if they can't deliver it, you're exactly right. They got to store it in their warehouse it somewhere. And, you know, so if product's not moving, I totally agree with you, Thomas, that's got to be that warehousing's got to be a huge issue right now.
Well, and if they can't unload it in the warehouse, they store it on the truck. That's even worse.
They park it. Yeah.
Yep.
Let me give everyone a big fail, I guess, that maybe you could use for an investment tip. So I was on a call. I told some folks this a while back. I was on a call with Crow Brothers, and they were on the call. And as you guys know, they're huge real estate investors globally, nationally, all across the board. Well, they see and forecast what you're saying, Tom. I mean, they see this massive push to own warehouse space for the last mile, or just in time, like you're talking, like just in time delivery, that last mile. So owning warehouse space, they say, and at least the guys I'm talking with on the big hedge fund side, they think it's going to be huge. Now, they said they made some critical errors early. They went in and bought some strip malls, they said, or like, you know, like in our area out here, you know, in the suburban areas, like say a strip mall and center and things that really kind of early in COVID went out of business because they were pressured pretty heavy. So they're buying them at deep discount. But they said they were going to turn those into warehouse spaces in some of these other retail developments. And they said they got smoked and had a early learning curve because the city and the neighborhoods around those locations just bitched a fit because of all the truckers coming in there late at night and trying to drop shit off. So it's like, I could see, you know, and that's why Michelle and I talk, we've been trying to buy some buildings and properties that have easy road frontage, highway access, just for those reasons, Mike and Tom. Just, I think if you're going to do a warehouse space, which I think a lot of guys are talking about buying some places at a discount and turning it to warehouse space, you best think about the neighborhood around you and how big a fit they're going to throw at the local governments when the truckers are coming in and circling the wagons. So I thought it was interesting because it's always the shit you never think about that ends up biting you in the ass the most on all these investments. You're thinking you're dead right on a warehouse, and then the damn neighbor folks blow up about it. So I think you got to be easy for the truckers to get in and off and access. And we watched those people that bought Southview, Mike, out here off 71 Highway, the old golf course, and turned that into that Chewy distribution center. I think Amazon rented some stuff. I mean, that's probably a perfect move there. You know, anything probably right off the highway like that. You
know, Kevin, I came back from up around Liberty this morning or this afternoon, and you know, everything there just south of the river on 435, they've expanded that. There's up there by Claycomo plant. You know, I'm sure at Ford plant they're needing to offload stuff and build warehouse there. You go out to Bonner Springs, you know, Amazon's built all kinds of stuff. And to the part, you know, what you guys are saying out there in Gardner, out there at the Intermodal facility, all the warehouse space is being built. I mean, it's just exploded. And, you know, everywhere in this city, you know, it touches all directions outside of Kansas City.
Yeah, and I feel like that's going to be a play for a lot of our bigger farmers and producers that are through the Midwest, centrally located and got good highway access. There might be some serious real estate plays there if, like, Tom's numbers are right, and we're way underbuilt. So
yeah,
it makes sense. Yeah. What's another one, guys? Todd, you got anything?
Yeah, you guys seen or hear anything about potentially creating a tiered payment or premium system for delivery? My understanding is, most of the stuff's on a note, it just gets delivered when it gets delivered, but with all the backup and stuff, they might start looking at getting the premium stuff out, which would make the general line get way back behind. But is there any talk on that from you guys' front?
The only thing I've heard on that is on high-end merchandise. I mean, in the problem we have in the grain business is grain is not high-end merchandise. If you're going to do things that are priorities, you're going to do them on intermodal, which in most of the intermodal that's moving quickly now is high value commodity. I mean, if you think about how many iPads or high phones you can put in a 20-foot equivalent container, you can put a lot. But if you're putting corn flour in there, then you're in a different world. So the expediting that we're seeing is on the high end products that can afford it.
We've seen the same. We've got motor carriers who have dedicated lanes and with shippers, and those guys that whether it be a pharmaceutical or a cell phone or whatever, they get a premium already, and they'll run teams, and those guys will I have one guy who's hauling pharmaceuticals from one side of the country to the other, on 2 team drivers, and each one of them make about $250,000 a year. So that gives you an idea of what the cost is. I don't know what the mileage cost is, but in order to pay those drivers that kind of money, that's a boatload. So tells you what
you put 25 cents or 30 cents on an iPad or a prescription drug or something, that's nothing. But when you start putting it on a bushel of grain, you're talking about a different world.
I get you. I hear you.
That makes sense. The big buzz right now in our world is this whole fertilizer pinch or problem or shortage that we're going to see coming up. And I think a lot of it's because we believe that the freight's dislocated. We're going to have seasonalities that create some dislocation, obviously in rail and in trucking, in some select areas where they're talking some people may not be able to get their hands on some fertilizers as we move forward next year. What are you guys hearing on that front? Anything?
I really haven't heard anything on the fertilizer side, but again, from a rail standpoint, once it gets to that first terminal, it's going to move. The rails still have capacity. From a realistic standpoint, yeah, they may have an employee problem and some COVID issues and some people calling in sick or going hunting. We got the holidays coming up, but we're seeing pretty good service. I mean, I would say our service this year's out of the last 9 or 10 years, it's equal, if not a little better. We have about 30 plants that we deal with: ag, food, petroleum, ethanol. All of them are seeing about the same. We're not filing as many problem logs as we do some years. Let me qualify that a little bit. The service in the West is a hell of a lot better than the service in the East. The CSX has really fallen apart in terms of their service, but even them, they're improving some now. So right now we're not having a lot of issues. We're getting stuff delivered when we need it and where we need it.
To that point, our guys move, and where they have problems, a lot of our guys is when you're going into the metropolitan areas, the big metropolitan. A lot of them don't want to go there if they don't have to, just because of the infrastructure's not as good. It takes longer to deliver, so they get paid by the mile, but they're not over the road, so they get a premium for when they go to those areas. And a lot of the drivers don't like going there. You don't like going the stop and go and type of traffic. And from an insurance perspective, it dovetails with that. That's where your large verdicts are, in those areas. So when they have a lane change or rear end or something like that, it's very costly. So that creates an issue for people driving into those areas. The insurance rates, if you're gonna haul into Chicago or on any coast, whether it be Houston or East Coast, West Coast, insurance premiums are going to be higher. So consequently, a lot of guys are saying, if we're going to go there, we're going to get a premium to go there, inflated rate. So,
but you have to for another reason too, and that is if you're just in time and you've got a slot. I mean, I used to work with all those truckers that had delivery slots. If you've got a slot that's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to unload and you're going into a big city, man, you've got to be 2 or 3 hours earlier. You're not going to hit your slot. I mean, that's so unpredictable the minute you get in a city. Going to Chicago is a lot more unpredictable than going to Ames, Iowa.
Right.
I mean,
Right. And then you sit and wait. And so you know, if you're not running, that driver's not making any money. If he's sitting, he's losing money.
What type of pressure are we going to see from all these climate change initiatives? I know, Nate, you sent the article about where we'll be with some of these the corn and different things. Where are we going to be with all this?
Well, the rail side's got a hell of an opportunity, you know, just because the mass that a locomotive moves, it produces a third of the CO2 than an equivalent truck moves. So they've got a real opportunity here if they can just get their furloughed workers back to work. As Tom mentioned, some of the folks in the East are having a little bit harder time, but they've really got an opportunity here to do things in the public interest that some of the new agenda really likes. Of moving more freight on rail. But, you know, overall in the intermodal space, outside of the, you know, the manifest and the shuttle trains, intermodal ain't doing that well. Yeah, it's a little better than overall versus last year, but third quarter it was down 3% overall for the industry. Intermodal volume was down. You hear Mike and Tom talk about how much pressure there is with motor carriers. That just doesn't pencil. And what's even worse on that is the biggest decline in intermodal traffic. You think it's the ports, right? The Kansas City challenge, the Chicago challenge, LA, Savannah's having a hard time now. But actually, domestic intermodal, the 53 containers and trailers, that was down 6% in third quarter. That ain't good. And it's all about service. You know, the rail's doing the best they can. I know everybody's working hard, but when you cut your staff that much, and you had to in COVID, when you cut and you don't have a practice squad, and you don't have backup positions, and then all these challenges we talk about anybody coming back to work, it's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, but intermodal has to have truck on both ends, and the drayage is where we're running into a lot of problems. I mean, they talk about LA and all the problems in LA. The problems in LA are drayage. You got to get those damn containers off the dock and get them to a railhead. And you got to have drayage at both ends of any intermodal. I mean, we don't run a lot of intermodal, but I would say right now, our customers are at zero intermodal because we'd rather have a truck driver take it all the way than just to haul it to the intermodal site and get it on a train and try to get it on the other end.
Yep.
So guys, is there any truth to the crane operator issue that you hear on some news channels that people saying the cranes are sitting there not moving?
You're talking about in the ports?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Before I address that, let me back up a little bit, because the question about climate change, we just did a major study for a client that asked that specific question. So we went to all of the railroads, but particularly the Western railroads, and asked them about the impact of climate change and what they were going to have to do with their locomotives, and if they were looking at going to electric locomotives, or if they were looking at electrification of any part of their lines, or if they were looking at emissions out of the locomotives. And, you know, we've got several different types of locomotives now, and these tier 5 locomotives are a lot more expensive because they emit a lot less carbon. And the general consensus was that they're going to have to go to a much different locomotive in California, maybe the whole West Coast, than they are in other parts of the country. And they're going to be expensive, but yet it's not going to be near as expensive as truckers are going to have to deal with on their side. So I don't think the railroads are too worried about it. They think they emit so much less than truckers do that they'll be able to deal with that, but it is going to influence rail rates. They didn't indicate that it would be above 4 or 5% nationwide, but that's going to put some pressure on freight rates up. To your other question about the crane operators, you know, I've had a very diverse background in transportation, and very early on, I was responsible for all of the ports in the US for Continental Grain Company. And dealing with the West Coast ILA was the most difficult experience that I ever got into. The longshoremen out there have rigid contracts. They're very inflexible. I looked it up the other day. If you're unloading a container, every one of those cranes has a 13-person gang. They have a supervisor and a timekeeper for that guy that's sitting up there operating the crane. And the rest of these guys, I don't know what the hell they're doing. But when we used to load grain ships, most of them are standing around with, or sitting around doing nothing. So I think there's, Biden is such a union guy right now, and just say that as it is, that I don't think he's going to convince those unions to do anything different than they've been doing. They get paid for 4,000 hours a year by contract, but they only have to work 2,600 hours a year. And that's all I can say. So any problem you got with a crane, you got.
And see, Tom, the guys in the east, like Savannah, they might have 4 to 5 cranes working a shift. They've got so much congestion. They can't lay boxes down. They'll work 3. They can't get the production. Whole thing's backing up at the ports due to dray, due to chassis, due to man hours. And I just don't know how we're going to get out of this mess anytime soon. It is not just one place. It's backed up with the entire system. And the thing about intermodal, let's call it international intermodal or even domestic, it doesn't have the market signals like we do in that, right? You don't see international containerized shipment. A thing like the St. Louis Merchants Exchange. You don't see COTS or shuttle programs like they do in bulk ag. So there's really no market signal that suppliers and buyers can really use to get around these quagmires. The ships. What are we now? 18,000, 22,000 TEUs. Only a few ports can take them. The operators of those ships are in 3 big alliances. So every carrier in that alliance shares a ship. So how are you going to change to convert to a smaller port that can't take those containers off those massive ships? And we just have continued lemmings going over the coastline. What was it, Tom? 100 vessels off of San Pedro this week?
Yep.
3 vessels sitting. And there's no signals like we've got an ag in this industry that starts pointing to alternatives. It's just we just continue to pile them up. And until we get market signals and transparency like we have in the ag space, where the market can adjust itself, I just don't see how we're going to get out of this quagmire anytime soon.
Well, I don't either. In the plan that I read that Biden put forward on this would increase the container flow 3,500 containers a week. And you got 70 or 80 container ships sitting out there with the average of 15,000 containers apiece. You're not going to make a dent in it.
Now, on the eastern ports, Georgia, they have some stuff they're doing that's starting to improve. They themselves, as GPA, are building their own inland ports that the port is doing, to where you get boxes off the jetty, get it out of Savannah, take it up to North Georgia, North Carolina, and other places closer to the distribution warehouses to allow some throughput. West Coast don't have that. And I don't think any of Kevin's neighbors in California want to have a new inland port right next to their, parachuting by air thing or whatever. It's not the desire in the West Coast to create capacity off the port. BNSF, who I'm an alumni of, I worked hard there. We tried to do a near dock facility in LA. We called it SCIG. We worked for 12 years to get that thing permitted. We had electric cranes. We had electric dray trucks. We would eliminate 2 million truck moves to the Inland Empire a year. We worked with the schools, the community, the whole thing. Didn't get done because of the pressure. They don't want the freight. They don't want
California. That's the answer.
So the constraint, I mean, I'm an optimist, but I just don't know how it's gonna, if we're gonna get out of this thing anytime soon.
Well, and the other ports
So-
that you mentioned, when you start talking about Savannah and Wilmington and Miami and Tampa and Houston and Mobile and even New York, you know, they're just not going to be able to step up quickly enough to resolve this problem. They may add some incremental capacity that helps us 3 or 4 years down the road, but they're not going to do anything here.
So here's my question then, as we roll back to investing in an inflation, Michelle drug me up to Nebraska Furniture Mart this weekend. Jordan's buying his first new house and shit, he needs a washer and dryer. And oh boy, you know, Tom, we got to go help him find it and pick, you know, all the bullshit. And so we're up there and the people tell us, well, you can't order anything. They're like, you want to order it? Hell, you're 6 to 8 months out. It's worse now than it was a year ago. And I said, you got to be shitting me. And they're talking about a lot of different things. And I said, and they just said, basically transportation, you know, just nothing's moving anywhere for them anyway, as far as getting things in from overseas or, you know, the ocean freight side of things. And like you guys are saying, then it gets logged up a little bit here. Once it gets to the terminal, like Tom said, I think we're getting the movement, but getting it over here, getting it to the terminal. And if that's the case, I said to Jordan, you extrapolate that out and it's like, how the hell are these companies going to show good, strong earnings?
Right.
You know, maybe 2 quarters from now.
Got to be price.
Like I'm trying to get
Yeah.
my girlfriend a Bronco, and I was asking my buddy who works at a Ford dealership. I'm like, hey, what are the deals on these Broncos? And he's like, dude, honestly, between me and you, since we're friends, like, I've had people waiting 8 months to get them. And even on like the X-Swag side of things, I was waiting on a bunch of Carhartt stuff to come in October. And they had a date set. And then I looked on there that date. They said, nah, try again at the end of February. Like, gosh dang. I'm just saying, like, we were already waiting in July. They're going to be a year out before they get anything.
Yeah. I ordered a stove in Florida in January this year. It's getting delivered this week.
Well, you must not have the right contacts because I ordered a washer and dryer about 30 minutes ago and it's going to be delivered Monday. You need to talk to me, buddy. Slide feet.
Hey, we're getting one delivered, but it was a scratch and dent sale. We're just moving one right out of the showroom floor.
On the car thing, I was trying to get a Toyota Land Cruiser. This is the last year they're building them.
Yeah.
The last quote I got was the cheapest quote I got was 25% above sticker. The worst quote I got was 100% above sticker.
Wow.
100%, almost $200,000 for an SUV.
I got pissed one day and just took my truck. I had a GMC pickup truck, 2,500. Ran it over there to CarMax, and I'm not shitting you. They gave me almost $6,000 over sticker, and I had almost 20,000 miles on it. And I think I bought it maybe $5,000 under sticker. I couldn't believe it. And Jordan's like, "So what are you gonna do now, Dad? What are you gonna drive?" I said, "I'm gonna drive your truck for a while until prices come down." He doesn't like that idea, but that's what's happening. So too funny, but yeah, I don't know, guy. I mean, it feels like then inflation is gonna stay kind of hot for a while. I mean,
It's got to. It's got to.
I would think with the freight rates, you know, as just Thomas and everybody else saying there that, you know, I don't know how it can't. I mean, you know, all these freight rates have gone through the roof, and, you know, those shippers aren't absorbing that cost. You know, it's going to be passed on to everybody. When the fuel touches everything, you know, in our business, you know, the truckers, they're somewhat insulated, our long haul guys, with the fuel surcharge, you know, gets passed on. However, I mean, that goes straight in that cost of the product. So, you know, the idea of inflation, you know, being transitory or whatever, I don't see it. You know, I think it's here to stay for a while.
Yeah, how much longer can a lot of these guys hang on with like their current pricing? I know like a lot of my vendors now with like the big coolers and stuff, they're telling me just in freight rates, they're just fighting to break even on their products. Like they're making no money at all. And they're like, eventually we're going to have to which I know they're talking probably the beginning of 2022, they're like, we're going to have price increases just because of freight more than material cost.
And there's your inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then you may or may not have seen this, but the Burlington Northern, in their infinite wisdom, is implementing a fuel surcharge January 1st. And our calculation is that, that's gonna increase freight rates anywhere from $150 a car to $400 a car next year. And on ag, that announcement just came out. I haven't, I've seen it, but I haven't forwarded it to anybody. We're just trying to talk to them. In fact, I'm waiting on them to call me now to discuss if they're really going to implement that and at what strike the highway diesel price will be. But I understand it's $2.50 a gallon. Well, you know where that is now. So,
well, the trucking deal is an index that just slides up and down. So, I mean, price of diesel goes up, so do the rates. There's about a week to 10-day lag, but and so it's a very, very inflationary.
And you take a look at fuel and what the prognosis is of, WTI and Brent crude. Look at the investment in upstream oil and gas is down 40% from where it was, right?
Right.
Nobody's going to invest in it because it's dirty. We don't want to do that. We got the Dutch government suing Shell being a CO2 emission. Shell sells all of its Permian assets to another party. I think they sold Conoco. They got some active investors on the Exxon board. Exxon. John D. Rockefeller started Exxon. They won the proxy and they're going to advocate a green way. So the big boys aren't going to do what they normally do. When price comes up, they look to replace reserves, get more acreage, do more offshore, do more fracking. It's not going to happen. The only guys who are going to do it is OPEC, Russia, and privately owned companies that have got acreage in the cash to go frack some more wells and produce some more oil. We're going to see high oil prices for years.
I would agree. We ride a lot of frack sand haulers down in the Texas, Oklahoma area. And back, when everything was 3-4 years ago, when all the fracking and everything was going, that business exploded. And you would think it would do that, and then it tapers off, then it's come back, but it hasn't exploded like it did. And so that's a great point, Nate, because we just haven't seen that. So consequently, I think obviously the production's down and the oil prices are going to stay high.
Yeah, I agree with Nate. I mean, all of the calls I've been on are basically most of your private equity guys, they don't want to throw any money at new oil exploration or oil infrastructure, really. I mean, they're wanting to be ESG and throw money, where the millennials want to put their 401k and their money, and they want to try and save the world and save the planet. I told Todd, I said, when I saw that millennials are mentally distraught, like 70% have anxiety daily about our climate and climate change, I thought, holy shit. I mean, we're going to change some things. I mean, if they're going to push their money all in that direction, and that's what I'm saying. Tom, you're saying tier 5 locomotives a lot more. Well, what's going to happen when they really have to pressure and transition these truckers into this electric world, or
and I think it's coming. That electric truck is there now. So, I think you're going to see it. Over the times, we've had some truck lines explore the natural gas issue, and they've used that as a very efficient, what they kind of like what you had said earlier, Kevin, some things they missed were when those trucks are in an accident, that natural gas explodes. And so you got it versus a diesel tank that just leaks. So that was a problem they had not really considered. So they backed off a little bit on that. But no, I think the electric truck will be coming. They're going to have to figure out some type of a battery and length of charge, because you can't, like we were saying, the downtime right now, that trucker's not going to be able to pull over and, charge his truck up for 3 hours while he's
Gonna have to be a battery exchange.
something.
Mike, what's the sticker on an electric truck? 300 grand?
I'm sorry.
What's the sticker price for an electric tractor, Class 8 tractor? What, 300,000, 350?
I would say probably, Nate. It's
Wow.
crazy.
Of course, the new locomotives, the new diesel electric locomotives are almost to 4 million now. So if you start putting tier 5 on those, it's going to be 4 million.
Yeah.
So that just adds to the expenses.
There you go.
Make it more expensive for sure. So, wow, crazy.
We sure are unicorns and pink ponies today on any of this stuff, aren't we?
No, it doesn't look like it. I think it looks like, yeah, there's going to be some problems for a while. Definitely some change as we try to move in this direction.
On the
We always like, go ahead, Nate. Yeah.
what Tom was saying on the locomotives, like he was saying, there's some good things coming. Wabtec, which bought GE, they took the locomotive and took out the generator, took out the diesel, and put a whole bunch of batteries in there, right? And then they run it in the consist. It was the trailing unit. And normally when a train decelerates, they do dynamic braking. They reverse the polarity of the traction motors. And that energy goes up to fans on the top of the locomotive, and you blow it off. It makes heat and you blow it off. They're taking that now and putting that in the battery. And then when you come into an incline or an area that requires more tractive effort, they draw off the battery instead of having to fire up and put to another throttle position on the diesel locomotives. And their first one saved 10% fuel for the consist. That's a big deal. And they've got a new one that's developing that's going to have double or triple the power, and they're saying it could be up to 30% fuel savings for the consist, that being the diesel locomotives in addition to the electric. So, and that can be done. That can be done today. So again, as Tom said, it's going to be a little more expensive for the rail, but they've got some options available now that will, I think, help out fuel expense, which is going to go sky high, and help out the CO2 preferences of all of Kevin's millennials as well. So,
You know, when we asked both the BN and the UP about that, whether they would electrify part of their lines and use, just electric locomotives, or whether they would use battery powered, I guess the UP has a battery, and maybe that's the carrier that you're talking about. They have a unit that they're experimenting with right now. The BN was not optimistic about it at all. We talked to some pretty senior people about this because this was a pretty big project. The UP just said they're in the experimental stage, so they're years away from doing that. But and I actually know of a locomotive that one of the associates in the industry bought himself personally, put it in use in California. He paid about $700,000 for it, and he offered it to me for $100,000 less than a year later. So there's we're still in the experimental stage, but we're a long way from something that will work there. What we're not a long way away from, though, it's different if you put compressed natural gas and use that in a train, because they're already hauling hazmat materials. So they could put a CNG car or a propane car behind their consist and run it off of that and run a long way without having to refuel. But when I talked to them about that, they said, well, we discussed it, but we don't have a plan in place yet. So I don't think the railroads are really proactively worried about this at this point.
Yeah. Huh, interesting. Well, sounds like higher prices, higher gas prices. We concluded that. One of our questions we ask always, and we look at our farms like this. We look at our farms like, a few of my buddies' dads owned a lot of gas stations, Tom, through Kansas City, and they owned, I don't know, 15 or 20. And some of my other buddies' parents owned a bunch of gas stations. It's like, what do you do if you own gas stations right here and you're planning to leave them to your kids? How do you transition that? How do you make that play. And we're seeing the same in our farms. You know, a lot of our traditional farming is just being turned over upside down because of climate change, problems with this, that, government regulations. They're going to have to pivot and do something different. So I don't know. I mean, what happens with gas stations, fueling stations? How do you play that out?
Well, if all the things we're saying are true, I think they need to turn them into liquor stores because I'm going to be drinking more.
Bait
I
and
think
tackle
you're right.
shop. Let's go.
Bait and
fish.
tackle.
Yeah, bait, tackle, and liquor. There you go.
There you go. That's the
There you
model.
go. Shit, that's how Bass Pro Shop started. I like that plan. Back of his dad's
Is that
liquor
okay?
store.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah,
heard there was
it
going to be a
does.
liquor shortage too, and I assure you, there's not going to be in my house. I got it covered. I went long liquor over the weekend.
Exactly. Oh, too funny. So, well, all good stuff. Jordan, Todd, you guys got anything?
The only thing
And
I would have left is, you guys hear anything on this? We're seeing renewed biodiesel kind of stuff. Is that going to have any effect in this space besides going to electric?
Well, I think you guys know or are seeing, you know, what's happening in that space, particularly with soybean oil and the soybean processing plants and all the stuff that's being built on the BN High Line up there in the Dakotas. You know, I think it's going to, I don't know how much they can produce, but and now who was it that ADM came out and decided that they could produce jet fuel?
Saw it.
So if you're looking at that sort of thing, I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of this kind of maybe the same thing that we saw when we had ethanol plants go in on the soybean side. You're going to see a lot more of that stuff consumed locally. And so instead, from a rail standpoint, instead of moving so much corn, because ethanol took a huge chunk out of the corn moving on the railroads, you're probably going to see the same thing on the bean side. Whether or not that translates into really cost-effective fuel for jets or trucks or whatever, I don't know.
I don't either.
How are you?
Michelle wanted to say, hey,
Hi,
Nice
Michelle.
to see you. From
Hi,
Michelle
Michelle.
hadn't seen any.
how you guys been?
Doing well.
She's been busting my ass, Mike, Tom, to get down to Florida. I was supposed to come down last year and hell, we never made it down. So,
Well, come on without him, Michelle. We got room for you.
Come down.
oh yeah,
Good idea.
You
Don't
and
tell
Terry
me.
will have a ball.
Yeah.
You're welcome to
exactly.
come down to
Yeah,
us.
he said something about losing my tan, and I was like, "Well, we know how to fix that." I think
That's
you can
right.
from Florida.
Oh boy, you guys are no help. No help. Yeah.
Right.
Good to see you.
Oh yeah. Hey, I'm with you guys. I think it's definitely going to be interesting to say the least. I don't, I'm trying to rearrange and restructure, I guess, a few things as we see it play out. But I think you're going to see a lot of change in infrastructure. I told Jordan I like being long some infrastructure plays on companies that are going to change infrastructure. My daughter's at Columbia. She's finishing up her master's in architect, but shit, you guys know Columbia. I mean, they're pretty hardcore to the left, and but she's done well up there, and she's met a lot of interesting people. But a lot of their push is how they're going to change these cities and how they're going to change things. And she made an interesting comment to me because I told her, how rural America has just been decimated over the last 30, 40 years. And, Todd and I and Jordan and I will travel around. I said, it's just sad to see these small towns in rural America and small town squares and shit, just everything, just decimated. And my daughter made an interesting point. There've been a ton of studies, I guess, in architect and everything, because we built these massive highway systems. And again, I never thought of this. As we built massive highway systems and cars and trucks were able to drive a lot further than they ever were before, you decimated the rural towns. You just passed them by. We used to, you guys used to, when you take a road trip, you stop at every small town, travel down old 71 high, you weren't on a super highway and you'd wind in and out and go to a diner and stop at a bar and stop at a shit that killed a lot of it. And I think that's very interesting to how you think, if we play this forward and create more long distance vehicles that will never have to stop. Shit, there might not be anything between here and Chicago. You just go straight from Kansas City, Chicago, it won't be nothing. I mean, it's like, I don't know. It's interesting to think about, but we're seeing a lot more architect firms trying to redesign exits bridges, change things for self-driving, autonomous. I think they may have autonomous truck lanes, just, where it's just nothing but 18 wheelers as you get some of this new design and new infrastructure spending, just redesigning how all of that flows and plays out. So I don't know. I find that pretty interesting. But I think there's going to be huge money. There's going to be huge money in that recreating green space in these urban areas. And Kennedy said right now in New York, they blocked off a whole 6 or 8 block area where they're tearing down buildings. And it's just nothing but green space where they're allowing no cars, no nothing. Walk their dog. And
well, you can't even, I was just up there and you can't park on the street up there anymore. They turned it all into all the restaurants.
And they're leaving it there.
Taking over the streets, and it's like outdoor seating in the street in the restaurant room.
A lot of areas. And Kennedy told me the urban planning people came and talked to them, and they're not changing that back in a lot of areas. They're going to leave it because they don't like the cars and the emissions, and they're going to cut back on all that. So I see there's probably going to be quite a bit of money made in in the concrete work and changing and redesigning and restructuring a lot of that and retooling, I guess, a lot of things for electric and climate change and vehicle and transportation.
That is just kind of a sidebar to that. Parking is probably one of the top 5 complaints in the trucking industry, for the long haul driver. There's no place to park. The rest areas are full and truck stops are full, and they can't, so they got to drive out a route or wherever to go to just park the truck. And that's a huge problem for drivers as to why they're like saying we don't mess with it anymore, especially as you get to the urban areas. There's just, if you'll notice going up early morning, you're leaving Kansas City or coming into it or anything, those rest areas are jam packed with guys parked on the shoulder all the way up for a long ways.
So
Mike, I hadn't really thought about it, but we drove probably 15 or 1600 miles in the last couple of months, and noticed the same thing. I really didn't pay that much attention as to why, but there's some big rest areas in Florida and Georgia and North Carolina and South Carolina. I mean, big truck stop rest areas and big truck stops. I mean, really big truck stops. And yet we saw them parked just on, any access road that they get to get off the interstate and to get back on the interstate. They would just pull over and park
right
on the access roads, just tons of them.
Yeah, that's it. Now that I think about it, Michelle and I talked about that too, Tom. I didn't know. Yeah, Mike brings that up. I'm seeing that a lot of places for sure. So interesting.
So Mike, if there's such a constraint with drivers getting into urban areas, the insurance rates are going out of sight, they can't get a place to park. As we have more automated manufacturing, which doesn't require such a huge workforce, might that be opposite of Kevin's downer future of rural America? Could we have more manufacturing outside of these congested areas that truckers and railroads can get to produce goods? Maybe that might go that way. It doesn't have to be in a major urban area that required such a large workforce as it might be in the future. I don't know. What do you think?
We've seen that, throughout I grew up in Chillicothe, Missouri, and, and they've got Wire Rope's got a huge facility up there. There's a lot of cold storage up there. So, you're seeing that moved out, and about every, rural town has some type of a major manufacturer in it now. So I think the manufacturers who have identified that correctly. It's just the same thing. It's just that workforce, but as you allude to, Nate, if it can be automated, then all the better. But good point.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. It's
So
if you can get to work.
Yeah.
My last question for this esteemed panel of experts is, if I'm high value ag, if I'm dried peas and lentils or IP, I can't get boxes, I can't get truckers. How in the hell am I going to export my high value product that I need now get into to offset changes in the bean market and corn and all that? What the hell do I do now?
We got that answer for you, Nate. You call Nexus 360.
I mean, Tom, did you go back to transloading into boxcars again and then spin the super sacks at the ports on the outbound side into break bulk vessels? I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think that's going to work at all because I don't think the ports are going to even want to try to deal with break bulk anymore. You might go to a small port and get it, but you know, it's going to be ocean freight's going to be a lot more expensive. You know, that's one thing we haven't talked about is how much ocean freight's jumped, but you know, particularly on the bulk side, you know, what's happened on the container side. It's been all over the place, but container ocean freight's probably 4 times what it was 2 years ago, from 5,000 a container to 20,000 a container. But you know, grain ocean freight rate, particularly out of the Gulf and PNW, let's see, it's up 87% from the PNW in the last year. From the Gulf is up actually 87.9% of PNW, 87%, and the spread is up 85%. So you now have a $37 spread between Gulf and PNW ocean freight. So all this congestion and all these traumas that are going on have hit the bulk freight market too.
Yeah.
And bunkers, don't forget bunkers on ocean freight, big number.
Yeah.
I don't have any good news for you.
No, Nate, I don't either. Yeah, I don't either. On the guys trying to ship, do their own. I don't
Well,
either. That's
The last thing I would add is we've canvassed the railroads over the last 60 days, trying to find out what they're going to do on freight rates for next year. We're going to see a minimum of 3% and a maximum 10% pretty much across the board. 10% increase on rail rates when you start putting a fuel surcharge on top of that. Boy, that's a big number. That's a big number. I don't think I've seen that in my career.
I always say too, you know, the rule of thumb in our world was if you saw close to 100% increase or 90% increase in energy prices within a 12-month period, that's your go-to to just short the shit out of the stock market. And that's been a play every time. And whether it was in the 70s with the oil crisis or when you had the break in 08, the killer to the U.S. consumer was the plus $4 oil and how quickly it came about. This rebound, we're close. I mean, you get average fuel costs up closer to 390, 380, 390. I'm telling you, there's going to be some issues. And if you guys are saying you're going to see that type of hike and raise on the freight side, you're going to see some similar type of plays back to when we got hit pretty aggressively in 08. It's just you buckle the U.S. consumer. Right now, it ain't the case, but just because nobody's going back to work. I mean, you've seen the work numbers on back to the office. I mean, we're still at like 36, 37%. Texas is the only place that has anybody back at work. And hell, they're still at like 50 in Houston and Dallas, 50%. Our data comes in from those people that swipe the office key codes. And shit, they're at 36% in New York, 39% in LA and California. Florida is a little higher, but Texas is the only one close to 50%. So nobody's back at work. Nobody's going back to the office. And I don't see
people
back.
going back.
I don't
It
think
doesn't
people
feel
are
like
going to go back.
They're not.
That's what we're hearing from all of our CEOs and lawyers that represent a lot of these big companies. They're just saying off the record, these people are shedding office space, and they're getting rid of that shit as quick as they can, and they're going to go to some smaller little offices where guys or gals can come in, and maybe if the kids are driving them nuts at home, they got a little place to work every once in a while if they want a couple of days a week. But it doesn't feel like people are going to go back to the city.
No, we're offering people back, with part of Marsh. They offer you 3. You can come back full time. You can work part time coming in on a transitory basis, and then you can work from home remote. And they're thinking that's going to be, but I think they miscalculated. I think more people are wanting to stay home remote. Me being old school, I don't think that's good for the long term. I think it creates a culture that we're not familiar with. where we kind of build a family culture within a work environment, with training and communication and collaboration and things like that. You can't do that over a Zoom call. You got to listen to somebody at the cubicle next door. I told some people in our HR, I said, if you all think that's the way to go, why don't you raise your family that way? Give them all cell phones, tell them go to their room, order in their Uber Eats and go to the room and, tell them, give them kisses over the phone. You go, I said, you lose that interaction. And so, it's all changing. And, I get yelled at because I'm 66 years old and don't get the new wave here. But I said, I think we're missing something there. So, all right.
Yeah, it's always no, it's always like you said, Mike, and it's the same thing I say to my kids. It's shit. It's never the obvious. It's the things that you don't see and you don't equate for. And like you're saying, I 100% agree. I don't see how any of there may be a few companies or select companies where you may not need to be at the office or this, that, but there is no way you can learn the intangibles and the small details and things that younger people need to learn from the guys that have the experience and wisdom. No way you can do that in a
how do you
Zoom
get promoted? I mean, if you're a upcoming, mid manager and you want to get promoted and you're like going, well, I haven't had a chance to interact except how well you perform on a Zoom call. There's no beers after work or whatever. And that's where you collaborate. And that's when you get really smart, when you go to that bar, so.
That's what I said. That's where all my best deals have happened. That's what I tell Michelle. Late night.
Exactly.
I don't even
No,
see
I
it
agree,
on
but no, it's
a younger standpoint either. I mean, I think that's what people want and that's what they want to stick with. I think they like rolling out of bed 5 minutes before work and
yeah.
just going through the motions. And I have so many friends that I guess they got all those trackers on their computers or whatever. And they can tell when they're online and they got all those rigs, they got them all rigged up and they just disappear for 3 hours, but it looks like they're online. So,
oh boy,
we'll be out. And I'll be like, hey, what do you got work or something? Oh no, I got my computer all rigged up. They think I'm working. So,
Yeah, I believe.
Well, I'll tell you what, that COVID sure saved the golf industry because there's more, the golf courses are full, and I guarantee you those employers think those guys are at work.
For sure. So, yeah, I try. Hey, Mike, you'll get a kick out of it. Right at the beginning of COVID, Tom, I tried to buy a golf course out here in Kansas City, not far from us. And Country Creek was the one I tried to buy. And I tried to just toss in a little bit of a low. I mean, it wasn't much off of ass, just a little bit. And Michelle's like, what the hell are we going to do with this? And I said, well, shit, the way I'm seeing this, the guy had every tee box and every green. He had electricity and he had sprinkler systems on all of them.
There you go.
And it was right on a highway out here. And I said, shit, I think I can contract and grow specialty crops in greenhouses. I can pop them right on these greens and tee boxes.
There you go.
On the golf side. We're going to be in the parking business right here. Shit, he didn't take it and golf. Yeah, he didn't take it and golf just blew up. And I tried to make him another offer. And he said, nah, golf just got too busy again for him.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, green fees down here, pretty aggressive.
Oh, I'm sure, for sure. So
every country club's got a waiting list, so.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'll bet. So, well, I won't take any more of your guys' time. I appreciate it for sure.
Guys, thanks
Jordan,
for the invitation.
Yeah, I'm excited to see you guys. Yeah, everybody coming to FarmCon, I hope. I know a bunch of friends have called in and guys are all pumped. We haven't seen each other in a long time. So hopefully I'll see everyone in January. And then I'm going to hopefully after that head down to Florida. So
come on down.
Michelle, I hear you. I'll see you guys maybe.
Mike, you're not here, are you? You in Florida?
I'm right now. I'm in Leawood right now on this call, but I've got a place in Naples, so I'll go down there here.
Well, let me know when you're down here. I'll come down and we'll have a drink. I'll bring the booze. I got plenty.
You're on.
When you guys time come to Texas, we're at work, you know, you can come to our office this year. There's fish on the wall and it's a nice place. So come down.
Okay, love to.
All right, guys. Thank you. I sure appreciate it. Miss seeing you guys. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, John.